virtual leadership chat of our semester, kicking off with our Chancellor Muñoz. So I'm going to pass it over to Ian, our Vice President today, to get us started with introductions, and we'll go from there.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first leadership chat of the academic year. Today, we will be welcoming Chancellor Muñoz as our guest speaker. And from here, we're going to go ahead and introduce the board, and I will begin. My name is Ian Cook, this year's Vice President of Staff Assembly. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'll pass it to Austin.
Good afternoon, Austin Smith-Jones, this year's Staff Assembly President. Pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I will pass it to Alvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alvin Cha. I am this year's past president. Very happy to be in the role of past president this year. Pronouns he, him, his, and I will pass it over to Molly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Molly Leisure, and I am this year's finance officer elect. I will pass it over to Juan Lopez.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Juan Lopez, and pronouns he, him, his, and I am this year's co-communications chair, and I'll pass it on over to my other partner in crime, Brenda.
Hello, everyone. Brenda Maldonado Rosas, pronouns she, her, hers, ella, also co-communications chair. I will pass it on to Josh.
Hey, everyone. My name is Josh Reinhold. I am the Secretary of Staff Assembly this year. And I will now pass it over to, Soseek.
Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday here at the UC Merced campus. My name is Soseek Chibukjian, and pronouns is she, her, hers. And I am co-chair for events and outreach with my partner in crime, Brenna, which I'll pass on to right now.
I think Renee is off today, or I don't think she's in attendance today.
I think she's tied up. I know she's here.
Yeah.
She's probably tied up. My apologies about that. So
that's okay.
Let's pass it on to, did all of us go? How about Jamia? Let's introduce Jamia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamia Garrett, and I am the Staff Assembly Coordinator. Back to you, Ian.
All right, well, thank you very much for the board introductions there. At this time, we'd like to welcome Chancellor Juan Sanchez Muñoz. Chancellor has been a champion.
I'm giving the 10-second holds. Is anyone else having a screen freeze as well? Okay, I'll go ahead and step in for Ian. Technology issues are abound today, of course, but we're happy to continue on. So I'm happy to have our Chancellor Juan Sanchez Muñoz with us today to share some thoughts and get started in kicking off our virtual chat series for the year. So thank you so much, Chancellor, for being here today. We want to give you the floor at first to kind of just give some opening remarks as you'd like, and then we do have some questions pre-submitted that we've shared to discuss with you today. So the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Austin, and thank you, Ian, when you return to the web, to the Zoom. At any rate, good afternoon, everyone.
Here I am.
Okay, wonderful. Was there anything else you wanted to say? Not about me, hopefully, Ian, but before I start?
No, just thank you so much for being here.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's great to see you again, Ian. And good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the chance to participate in this kind of discussion and respond to some of your questions, share with you some thoughts that I have about this semester and the next year. And I also just appreciate these chats, whether with me or other people. I represent one perspective of leadership. Generally, my decisions are not made in isolation of the perspective of other people in leadership, whether it's Dr. Coley in PLPD or Dr. Sneer in finance, or people like the provost or the respective deans, or of course the representatives of the assembly. And so I share with you some ideas that I have. Generally, I like to make the distinction between sort of ideas and the ultimate decision. My hope is that the decision is informed by a multiplicity of ideas and perspectives, and generally that leads to the best results. So these kinds of conversations are important. They remind us of what people are doing, and they remind us also of the importance of thinking together, working together toward in common cause, toward the best possible solution. Generally, the best possible solution doesn't always reflect my immediate ideas or disposition about some decision. But as I said earlier, generally when it's informed by the perspective of others, it almost always invariably leads to a better outcome. At any rate, I appreciate the chance to come and chat with this group. This is, I think, my 6th meeting of the day, and I hope it'll be my most pleasant one. Later today, of course, some of you that were part of the Spedlove Prize last Sunday, we recorded it with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I will just end with this as I interacted with His Holiness, the 14th incarnation of the Dalai Lama, and the Bodhisattva of compassion. He said, and if you participate tonight, he said the compassionate mind is the curious mind. So I hope to exercise compassion in this work by asking questions, as we all do, always trying to be good stewards of the public trust, right? As a public institution, publicly financed, we have an expectation from our public that we do these jobs as professionally, as ethically, and as compassionately, but also as effectively as possible. And so I appreciated that about His Holiness talking about the curious and the compassionate mind. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. If we ask, why are we doing that? Why are we continuing to do that? The idea that that's also compassionate and kind and thoughtful, I appreciate it. So I try to work for as long as I do this work with that sort of curious mind. How can we serve better? How can we do it more ethically, more effectively? And by doing it more efficiently, we are able to do it for more people. And for more people, to me, is part of that definition of compassion. So again, I appreciate these conversations, and of course, the leadership of the Assembly for putting it together, as well as colleagues in my own office, Molly and others, but also the generosity of the invitation to address the group.
Thank you, Chancellor. I will start us off with our first question that we had submitted to us. Considering the new slogan of first, further, and forward, what is first on your list of priorities? What will get us there further? And how can we go together forward? And in preparation, I even wore my first further forward t-shirt today, so.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's terrific. Well, I appreciate that. Incidentally, let me just say to the group, I have some comments down here. So if you see me averting my eyes, it's not for the purpose of looking at text messages or emails, but just to sort of see the question and think about it a little bit more carefully. So let me just say that at the beginning. I was really, it's called an alliterative effect when you have the words all beginning in the same sound or consonant, in this case, first, further, forward. And so it was actually developed in consultation with a firm called Phoenix, firm that is run by a person of color. It's a woman of color who brought these ideas and possibilities together that we then socialize with different groups. And there's a couple of things about it, and let me then I'll more directly answer the question. The idea of sort of first as the first research university of the 21st century, and so many of our students are first generation, first in their family, right? Further is that I learned from a long time ago from a provost that I work for. He said, there's no way to coast except downhill. So not becoming complacent and thinking about further and how do we move forward? How do we take this enterprise of first generation students, first in their family, faculty? How do we move this forward and always further and forward? And how do we move this further? And then as the newest campus in the University of California, arguably the most distinguished system of higher education in the world, right? How do we go forward? How do we move this enterprise into a different iteration of excellence and success? And again, by doing so, offering this platform of opportunity to a greater population of students and faculty and staff. So I think about some of the first priorities, we have got to work on improving enrollment. Because so much of our revenue, this is not the case at the other campuses to the extent that it is here. not the case at a Berkeley or a UCLA or even an Irvine, where so much of what we do is dependent on state formula funding and tuition. Okay, and the way we're funded by the state is directly related to our enrollment, and the tuition that we generate is directly related to enrollment. And so that might sound a bit cold, sort of the finances. I don't think about it in those terms. I think about it in these terms. The campus was built to be at 10,000 plus right now, 10,000 plus. It was built with the promise of being at an enrollment of 10,000 plus. Right now, we're at 9,100. That means that almost 1,000 students and families are not being afforded the opportunity to be part of this campus. This campus, as built right now and staffed right now, should accommodate just over 10,000 students. And that means for almost 1,000 students and their families, again, we are not providing this education for. So my first priority is to make sure that we're fulfilling the promise, the value, and the mission of UC Merced as it currently exists. So further is we have to really develop the maturity of our campus now in terms of the policies, the procedures, the approaches, whether it's a school like the Gallo School or an academic degree program like electrical engineering that was just improved. How do we improve those processes? At Berkeley or UCLA, they have a century. That's a long time, y'all. That's a long time, okay, of revision, of errors, of correction, of refinement. We don't have 100 years of that. So how do we begin to really look at the things that, and I want to make this point very clear, the things that were necessary in 2005 and 2008 and absolutely critical in 2012 may now be hindrances in 2022. Does that make sense? We have to take a frank, honest, compassionate look at some of these areas to say, okay, without it, we couldn't have made it from 2008 to 2009. But now in 2022, it's an obstruction for where we want to be in 2025, 2030, 2040. So how do we begin to look at those parts of the campus, hopefully with a different kind of optic to ask ourselves, are these the right things? Are the people in the right places? Are these responsibilities well placed in this particular unit, that not from a position of scarcity and a limited staff, but from a position of some degree of confidence of where we're going to evolve to as we move forward. So I'm very optimistic about the future of the campus. I'm optimistic about enrollment. I'm optimistic about our funding, our formula, and the things that at least I've been part of bringing to campus in the last 2 years. Almost 220 million for a new building, medical education building. The 15 million, there's 15 million, not all of which will come here, to begin to support the operations. That's money we don't have to pay back. The building is not part of 2020. We're not making payments on that building. Our part of the 15 million plus, there'll be more for operating, is annual. It's money that we get that's not going to be taken from this area of the campus or this school or parking or auxiliaries. Okay, the money that we received as part of the recent appropriations, almost 100 million in capital projects. The things we build with that money, we're not going to have to pay back. They're not going to be a payment. I'm not going to have to take it from auxiliaries or POPD or, okay. So, and then of course, the money that we received for climate research, $18 million plus, was not money that we're going to have to repay as well. So these things are going to move us forward, because we're not dragging debt from the past into that future. And so those are among my priorities: enrollment, programmatic growth, campus growth, school, policy maturation, refinement, revision, correction, improvement, all of which the staff are so vital to, because it's going to be based on your judgment and your expertise that you elevate recommendations to the right vice chancellors, to the right, ultimately the provost, and then ultimately to my office to make those refinements and revisions and corrections. And then, of course, how do we program these dollars in a way that's going to help the campus move even with greater acceleration forward. One of the questions I would say is, how comfortable do we want to be remaining the smallest campus with the smallest budget? When I talk to people, and by the way, I talk to them at the Rayleighs. I talk to them at the football games. I talk to them when I go to Friday night of high school football games for Merced or Golden Valley or even El Capitan, and they've had a tough season. Or when I see them even at the swap meet off of Childs, and I've seen a couple people there. I was there this Saturday, and I don't sense from staff or faculty that people have limited ambitions for the campus, that they say we're content to be where we're at. In fact, I've heard faculty say to me, I came here to UC Merced to be part of the UC system and become an R1 research university in the country. That's the goal. So my role is to help facilitate those ambitions of the faculty and the staff and the students ultimately that come here. When we become an R1 institution, my hope is before the end of the decade, we will be the only system in America, think about this, where the highest category of research academic excellence exists on all 9 campuses of the system, excluding UC San Francisco. That means if you go to any university in the UC, you are guaranteed one of the most demanding, ambitious, and well-resourced educations anywhere in the world on any UC campus. And that's an extraordinary promise to deliver back on the citizens of California. So I'll just end there.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I'll pass it next to Alvin.
Thank you very much, Chancellor, for those wonderful words. It's very exciting to hear. Anytime we meet, I feel like there's a lot of excitement because you provide us with a lot of context, a lot of your vision and the vision of the campus. And I think that's really commendable. And my first question is actually going to be a slightly different because you mentioned His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I wonder if you got a chance to interact with him virtually. Was that what happened? Actually, again, I will see it later this evening, but I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing really quick your interactions with His Holiness.
Thank you, Alvin. Well, first of all, the answer is yes. I had a few moments where I read a statement and we interacted briefly, and it was just such an honor for me. I had a chance earlier in my career when I was at Cal State Fullerton to actually meet His Holiness, who came to that campus, and circumstances didn't permit. So this is a real privilege for me. He's one of the great leaders of our generation, a man of just infinite compassion and kindness and thoughtfulness. And when you see hear his remarks tonight, he made this is one point that at least for me was quite salient and resonant. He talked about when we begin, as we are born into this world, it's all this. We're all born and brought into this world the same. When we depart this world, we depart very much the same, and so our humanity is very much the same. There's a brilliant simplicity to that, how we are so much alike. And I thought again, it is not an overly complicated but greatly resonant sort of point about how we see each other in this increase. Well, obviously there are those that would like to paint an increasingly divided world, divisive even in our country, and for this leader to talk about how similar our oneness, he talked about it, our shared humanity. It was very, very therapeutic for me to hear that. It was very restorative, and it just one of the great privileges of my professional and personal life. He's 87. His Holiness is 87. And he's obviously, his mobility is somewhat limited, what he can do, particularly in the COVID environment. And so it was just a delight. I thought Dr. Hatton was brilliant in his moderation. I was most impressed by the questions from our students, as you will see. And of course, Ms. Spenlove, Sherry Spenlove, and her remarks to His Holiness.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I think, and again, my question leads into my actual question. regarding leadership, because as leader of the Tibetan community, and a man of peace, he has a lot of leadership aspirations. And so my question to you, Chancellor, is what motivates you as a leader? And then following on to that, how do you motivate others to strive for excellence and not just good leadership, but great leadership?
Okay, well, I appreciate that question. I will do my best to communicate at least the thoughts that come into my mind about leadership. So first of all, I often think that leadership is not a solitary act. Like if I lead if I or whomever is leading and they're by themselves, that's not called leadership. That's called being alone. So I think about leadership as a cooperative shared enterprise. And I've been fortunate to have worked for people who approach to this, and this is how Juan Muñoz thinks about this. Others may share this, others may not, but I approach this, I hope, with a servant's heart and a servant's mind, and that service is always limited. I know people that have been in this role for a long time, and then eventually we're not in this role. I think of people like Carol TK and Dr. Steve
Kang.
Yeah, right, and even Nathan when he did this work for a year. So and of course Dorothy Leland, right? So we're in these opportunities of service for a limited time. So most of these kinds of decisions, as I said a bit earlier, leadership should be approached, I think, distributedly, cooperatively, with compassion. I hope with some intellect, with some discernment, with some patience, with a sense of humanity. And that unfortunately all of us suffer from that condition of human fallibility, human frailty. So we think to do our best. Often even our best is not exactly the outcome that we hope for, but our intentions are honest and thoughtful. So as leaders or people with some degree of responsibility, they should exercise that kind of compassion, but they should not be, I think, apprehensive or timid about asking questions. I was delighted to hear His Holiness talk about compassion and curiosity. Sometimes it's important to say, why are we doing that? Is that the right course of action? That's not an indictment for the recommended course of action. It affords you an opportunity to say, let me defend why I think this is the right course of action. And so that when the person then says, okay, let's do, Alvin, let's follow it the way you say, then you can feel fully empowered and confident to say, okay, I enjoy that person, my supervisor's full support. And later on, when your supervisor is asked questions, they're in an ability to say, well, we're doing it for these reasons, this reason, and this reason, because I asked a question. Worse would be, we work together, you recommend a course of action, I say no, and that's the end of it. Okay. So creating an environment where Luana Putney and I, Dr. Putney and I, we talk about if you, I think you might have been, I know Jill Orcutt has been to the cabinet meeting. It's a speak up culture at the cabinet. I have challenges restricting people speak up because it becomes a little free for all in the cabinet, because you have to have a climate and landscape where people feel comfortable communicating idea, dissenting idea, contradictory opinion, so that we're moving toward the best possible solution. So I think that leadership has to be done in that context where it's open. People understand their lanes, but they're not reluctant to communicate ideas, even if those ideas filter into other people's lanes, if it's in the best interest of the outcome. And the outcome in our line of work, right? We're a university, okay? So our line of work is to deliver on an education that is transformative, that is well informed, obviously, that's transformative for our students, as well as create an apparatus here that helps in the development of science, knowledge, and the communication of that science, as well as creating an environment where staff feel that they're part of something meaningful, something satisfactory, something that when they look back, they look back at this campus and they say, I helped build that institution. Imagine the privilege and many that helped build Berkeley are not, around, but the privilege of being able to point to Bellevue and Lake and say, you see that top 10 university in America? I was part of that. My professional fingerprints are on that institution. That's an enormous privilege. So I think part of leadership is reminding people, why are we here? We're here to serve in the preparation of young people that we hope go further forward in creating a more prosperous, compassionate, successful future for all of us to inhabit. So I think of leadership in that sort of shared way. But I take it very, very seriously. These are difficult jobs, all of our jobs, okay? And our decisions have consequences. They have consequences for the institution, for the people that work here. And so we should take them very seriously, but we should also remind ourselves of the values, okay? The values and the mission of our campus and the privilege of higher education and the privilege of being part of great futures. And I personally take great satisfaction in that role for the limited time I'm allowed to serve in it.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, I think I have the next question, right?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, Chancellor, you touched on the topic of R1 status. So this question returns to that. In the strategic plan, one of our main goals is to become a Research One university. And this is a high-level goal. So do we have a detailed plan as to how we will get to R1? Is there a detailed plan for specific units? For example, how information technology will support becoming R1?
Well, I think the beginning answer is yes. The strategic plan becomes the template by which a more detailed plan for R1 will be extracted from. But in the absence of a strategic plan, how do you come up with an R1 plan in the absence of a broader strategic plan? Well, a strategic plan for UC Merced did not exist prior to my arrival. It does exist now. The strategic plan for the entirety of the university, which includes resource allocation, has to be considerate of the R1 aspirations. But again, in the absence of a strategic plan, very difficult to craft an R1 specific plan that could be theoretically in opposition to a plan for the entirety of the university. So we now have a comprehensive strategic plan, which is, I think, step number one. There's actually underway the development of a more nuanced plan related to possible investments to get us to R1. But let me make this point. So the R1 designation occurs at certain time intervals. That always happens in the rears, about 2 years prior to when it's announced. I believe the next period of time when that designation will be calculated by Carnegie is 2028, I think, right, 27 or 28. So if we look at 30, that means they will be looking at 28 numbers. Now, let me make this point as well. In the last period of time when these calculations were made, I'm going to get this number a little bit wrong, but the degree of proximity will not be substantially incorrect. So I want to say that the cutting score for the algorithm used by Carnegie to determine R1 designation, right, was about 130 with all of the calculations looking at research expenditures, PhD production, research faculty, and some other variables was about 130. At the last calculation, UC Merced was at 124. Most people don't realize how close we are. Okay, one of the areas that injured our score was the investment of research dollars in the social sciences and humanities. That is a bit counterintuitive. Most people would believe that it has to be increased research in physics, chemistry, biology, lab. Actually, one of the areas that harmed us was our current investments in the social sciences and humanities. I think we had a total of about 2.5 million annually that were being calculated in that category. So we need to make some specific detailed investments into that area. So we're looking at what that ultimately, those sort of allocations of resources look like in order to get us well beyond that. The 130 score is probably not going to be the score in 2028.
or 2030. So we need to be we need to accelerate past that number. And in certain ways, we have to substantially increase the number of our PhDs. We have to increase the number of our research, which are just lab research sort of scientists, not necessarily FTEs, Senate faculty. So there are a number of things that we have to do. We have our new Vice Chancellor for Research that was formerly at an R1 institution, very familiar with our system, starting October 1. That's very exciting. We've got some new dollars that we're going to begin a program through the support of the legislature and the office of the president, and that we were going to do a recalculation of what we have to do in order to be well in advance of what we anticipate. And there's some gaming you can do with where you think that number is going to be and what would be our ultimate number based on current and future anticipated investments in some key areas. So I would say that, yes, we have the outlines for a more detailed plan. And in terms of specifically IT, I know that we've made some investments of about $1 million in some student data tracking capacity. That was something that I approved personally, and that other investments will be made. I know that Nick is looking at this as well, but the specifics beyond that, I probably would provide you with not as accurate a response as I would like.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over now to Sosik.
Thank you, Josh. And Chancellor, thank you again for being here. My question to you is to do with staff and retention. Currently, there's a huge focus right now on retaining good staff right here at UC Merced. What practices do you use to retain staff in your own office? How might you advise supervisors struggling with this in our own units?
Right. Well, say good to see you. We normally see each other as I'm exiting the building. So
always.
So good. I always use the back door. I probably should go all the way around, but at any rate, good to see you again.
Well, you have a pass with me. I'll allow it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so look, some of the things that I have done. I've not always been a chancellor. Before this, I was at a school and in Houston, and before that, other places where I've had different levels of responsibility with different size staff. I take a personal interest in identifying people that have expressed an interest in developing. Some people want to advance. Some people have a different sense of their responsibility. It's not a matter of judgment. It's just a matter of what people want to do to find the most satisfaction in their careers. I have always made an effort to nominate people for committees, for additional responsibilities, for task forces. I have always sought to nominate people for professional development activities. The cabinet is what directly reports to me. And so Luana Putney, for example, went to the Harvard program at my recommendation. Dr. Sneer is going to go to a very important program called the Institute for Innovative Leadership in Higher Education. Those are cabinet members that I've nominated and recommended for certain professional development opportunities. I believe that we should take an interest. I say this all the time. It's always easier to retain great talent than to recruit great talent. So I'm astounded when I hear. I'm thinking of a person none of you know, but he was an assistant professor at a university I worked on. The dean didn't want to give him $5,000 increase. I said, from my administrative office, I will give you the $5,000 to keep him. The answer was no. Okay. He went to another university. Within 3 months, he landed a $1.8 million grant. I thought, we forwent $1.8 million because you wouldn't accept $5,000 from somebody else's office. My point is, it's almost always preferable to retain people with a little additional support. Some people are not motivated necessarily by an additional $5,000. They might say, can I have $5,000 in travel? Could you recommend me to this professional development program? I hear about this seminar at Tulane that I'd like to attend. Is that a possibility? And so I have always tried to manage to keep a pot of money for those kinds of professions. There's what I think you might be interested in, and then more importantly, what you tell me would be valuable to your ongoing professional development, and to have a pool of money that would be made available in order to incentivize you. Now, let me say, the Assembly has $1 million. I would do some research and see. I'm not sure that anybody else, any other school has used $1 million from the McKinsey Scott gifts for directly the staff assembly. There's resources there that could be made available for colleagues for any number of reasons that their immediate supervisors or what have you think are relevant. We have the Chancellor's Leadership Institute. What are the things I would challenge to say? What do you do to keep faculty, staff engaged and satisfied and supported? Okay. Do we have money available on campus? I would say we have some. Do we have enthusiasm to support staff? I would hope the answer is yes. Do we have professional development opportunities on campus? We do now. And so how do we, as managers, you and I, encourage younger colleagues to pursue those opportunities that we hope will result in a degree of satisfaction that retains them here on campus? I'll just end with two thoughts, because I've looked at this. So I've looked at the number of staff that we had in fall of 19 and the number of staff in fall of 22. And I am told we have more staff today than we did pre-pandemic. Just think about that. More staff. And we have more openings that are vacancies that are approved to fill than we did fall of 2019. We have a compression program to begin to address some of these salary gaps that have been developed over many years. So we have some things in place that I hope people feel are available to encourage our colleagues to remain part of UC Merced, if this is what would give them the most professional satisfaction. And in time, I hope that we will do more. Finally, from what I'm told, and I think Leela may be on the line. Our colleague, Dr. Putney, is out of the country, but there was a survey, an evaluation of retention or attrition from positions across the UC, and UC Merced has below the average for separations, below the average across the UC. Which means to me, as I interpret it, we have fewer people on average leaving UC Merced than other campuses. To me, that would hopefully indicate a greater degree of satisfaction with working at UC Merced. And I hope in time, people will experience even greater satisfaction.
Thank you, Chancellor, and great notes from that. I appreciate your answer. I'm going to pass it over to, I believe, Austin.
Thank you, Sosik. And Chancellor, you definitely are we're on the same line of thinking. Staff Assembly we are currently working on a proposal that will make funds available to staff to apply for, to assist with professional development opportunities that they may be interested in. So we're really excited about that, and we're hoping for a launch in spring. So really excited that we can use the funding, some of the funding, to be allocated to provide these opportunities to staff who are interested in looking for those, right? Wanting to have that next step of development.
Sure. I try to forward some of these, Austin. Well, that's wonderful. I know you were working in that direction, which is extraordinary. Obviously, I'll just, you know this, I think Alvin knows this, but I'm not sure if everyone else knows it. So this money, $1 million, is one time, it will be spent, right? But and you know that this is recorded, so you can hold me to this. But what I have said is, after the last year, right, Alvin, again, spend it judiciously. You don't have to say, okay, I mean, let's not spend any of this money, right, foolishly or recklessly. So, and if after 5 years, for example, you say, look, we have effectively programmed, 100,000, 150,000 in ways that help staff develop professionally, feel more satisfied, connected, not just UC Merced connection, by the way. I mean, this morning I was talking to the president of Princeton. All of us should have networks well beyond UC Merced to bring ideas, best practices, and potentially colleagues. But if at the end of that period of time we say, but we're going to need permanent funding, because now we've built a culture of expectation around faculty, around staff development that's going to require X amount of money, then I'm happy to have that conversation so that that money is available in perpetuity, well beyond Chancellor Muñoz, so that staff can now rely on X amount of dollars every year for these kinds of ongoing professional development opportunities. And some of them are quite expensive. And but they're very, very good. So I know that you were moving. I just wanted to reaffirm, Alvin has heard me say this, and I believe it was in the actual award letter that I provided. So my commitment is not just this amount, but well beyond it.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to developing programs that we think will have long-lasting legacy past any of our roles as we are now. Our next question is along the same line of staff and retention. Thinking about staff who are really wanting to kind of take that next step in leadership, looking for that next promotion, right? Looking for that next step in their career. How are we setting up ways on campus for folks to be successful in looking for those opportunities, looking for that next step, internal candidates, and looking for promotion opportunities?
Well, so much of this happens at the department level, not at the chancellor level. The ability of the chancellor, whoever is in this role, to identify, detect, and determine staff colleagues of additional ambition and drive and what have you. I don't know that we ever want this particular office to be responsible for that, but I certainly am encouraging managers to begin to identify who it is in their structure that might be not just interested, but have the aptitude and being mentored and shepherded. In education, I'm a curricularist. We talk about scaffolded toward, people talk about succession planning, but in my experience, very few people do it, because then you render yourself dispensable. You say, I'm gonna teach this person everything that I know, but then what I know becomes, let's just say, less contained to one person. And so I believe in scaffolding, as a matter of fact, and mentoring. And so I certainly would want to communicate that we have a responsibility to prepare other people to do our jobs. And in some ways, their own original ideas will complement our thinking about how do we do our job. I am convinced that we have too many, and let me use a technical engineering term, we have too many single points of failure. One person goes down and it sets a real sort of cascading effect, and in terms of everybody else has to pick up the extra work. And so that's one of the reasons I happen to know these numbers and the number of openings, and I receive an update on the number of vacancies every week, because I am convinced that we need to bring more staff, and you'll hear me talk about more staff more so than any other category very often, because there are too many places in the campus where we have this single point of failure, and it's just not the way you want to operate an entity as complex and as large as UC Merced. But I would leave that. I would defer to department chairs, managers, supervisors to begin to identify who it is, and maybe, here's what I do. I tell people, hey, would you like to get coffee? You want to go get lunch? And say, what are your goals? I'll just end with this story, which I thought was amazing when it happened to me. And so I've tried to do it because of the kind of impact it had in my own career. I had a job offer to leave a particular university to serve as a dean, some other place. And the president said to me, don't make a decision. Give me 15 minutes. So immediately I thought I was in trouble. And then he said, the provost and I want to take you to lunch. Then I thought it was like being called to the principal. I thought, wow, this is not going to go well. And we had lunch, and the president and the provost said, what is it that you want to do? And I said, well, I think I can do more, and I'd like the opportunity to develop exactly what you're saying, Austin. And they said, okay, here's what we're going to do for you. And they said, you're going to be responsible for this, this, and this. And I said, thank you, I'll stay. And now later on, resulted in some additional title and compensation, but that's not what I asked. They said, well, in order to develop those skills, we'll assign you these areas of responsibility. And I said, thank you. And his name was John Whitmore and Bill Marcy. And I said, thank you, Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Marcy. And so I've also personally have tried to express an interest to the people that I report to that look at, and I'll be very honest. I've said the same thing to Michael Drake. I'm waiting for him to call me back. But I've said, if there's anything that I might be able to help with that you think would be beneficial to the University of California, I'm prepared to. And so I think part of it is our responsibility to communicate. If you were my supervisor, Austin, I would say to you, Ms. Smith, I have ambitions. I would like, if there's something else I can help with. And then it's part of your responsibility, as it is mine, to then reciprocate if we believe that that person is at the right time in their career, mature, and skill to assume greater responsibility to afford them that opportunity. So I think it happens at a very micro level, and that all of us want to be developed in the way I described happened to me. That's not like a theoretical example. That's actually what happened. It set me on a different course. And because I was willing to be receptive to their guidance, and they were willing to be receptive to my expression of interest and development. So I would hope that that's how we would work here on campus within the contextual specificity of your departments, plural.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I did see also Priya posted the link to the Chancellor's Leadership Academy in the chat. So for folks who are on, want to check that out. It's a really, really great program, and I'm so excited to see it come to fruition this year. And with that, I'll pass it to Alvin for our next question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chancellor. And I wanted to just comment really quick about your points of failure. I too see a lot of the bottlenecks that occur here, and it's also comments that I've heard from fellow colleagues across campus about succession planning, about cross-training, and the lack of. And so I do see some of those challenges that exist as well. And so again, I just wanted to add a little bit of comment on your points of failure, as you called it, engineering tech terminology. My question is a little bit on the challenging end, because it's something that we've continuously talked about for quite some time now, especially during the pandemic when we were off campus. And so I'm going to read it the way it's worded because I want to keep true to the question. But I'm going to change it just a bit because you mentioned the chancellor level, and I think this is your level is too high of a level for this specific question. So the question goes, how are managers being held accountable for allowing for flexible work arrangements? There are still managers who do not support remote work, even though the work is not customer facing. And so the way that I'm going to rephrase this is, how should staff approach their managers, approach their colleagues to accommodate flexible work arrangements when it is needed, when it can be done based off of their role?
Right. Well, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the context that you put it in terms of whether or not this should be something that individually my office should insert itself in. There are things that were I a manager or a supervisor, I would not want the chancellor's office inserting itself into. So, but let me say this. I thought that when I spoke with all of the managers, I tried to be as clear as possible. I know you were there and others, to say that. So a couple of things. So part of it is we have to begin to define what you said is appropriate, is necessary, is permissible, right? Remote. Okay. What does that look like, so that when someone is saying to a manager, would you consider a greater degree of flexibility? It satisfies all of the requirements that you all, right? Those that are actually supervising people have determined. These are the sort of criteria necessary for this consideration, because we can't have somebody saying yes here and then in some other department, no, right? That impacts morale. So we need to create some consistency of expectation. I said this in my remarks to the manager, the group, the managers, as we were talking about the survey of how we work. There's what we think about work in late September 2022, and then there's how we see work in September 2025. But I am convinced that it will not be what we thought work was in September 2019. So I would say, let's be patient as we evolve how we work and flexibility and remote. Most of us at a certain age, my age, okay, had a definition of labor. Most in my age category have been forced to re-examine that definition. COVID has forced us to re-examine that definition. So much of what has happened in during COVID in terms of work productivity has evolved. In terms of how we evaluate work has evolved. Sometimes it's evolved positively, sometimes it's evolved negatively. So I think we still need some time to begin to reach a place where we say, for UC Merced, which is not Microsoft, which is not UT Austin, which is not Alabama, which is not Florida State, but at UC Merced, here's what we're comfortable with in terms of the balance of flexibility, remote, face-to-face, and how we work at UC Merced in Merced. Okay, for some people, I lived in Houston. Most people lived 35 miles outside of Houston. Took them an hour and 45 minutes to get to work. Okay, that's not Merced. If you live in Livingston, you can get here pretty quickly. So how we think about labor, work, presence in our part of the North Central Valley, my hope is we'll continue to go through some refinement. But I certainly believe that managers should always be receptive to a staff member saying, I'd like to have a conversation about this kind of work schedule. For these reasons, can I have an appointment to make a case for why and how you would hold me responsible, and performance expectations, work product expectations? I certainly believe that even a manager should always say yes to that meeting, even if the ultimate answer to the request is not yes. So in time, 6 months from now, that manager might say, I actually think that might work well. We're also considerate about our carbon footprint. How many people do we need to come on campus? How often? So there's some possible positives, benefits from rethinking how we work. So I see this as an evolving topic that we're not going to have sort of definitive. And the way, okay, we sort of know what the schedule was of fall of 2019, right? Monday through Friday, 9 to 4:30. Fridays were a little squishy. I'm going to use a technical term. Fridays were a little squishy. And we knew that this was kind of the work week. But I believe in higher education, as well as industries beyond higher ed, are all grappling with this as well. But I certainly I had things presented to me as a manager that I didn't approve, but I wouldn't say no immediately. And hopefully we have a culture where a staff member feels comfortable saying, if I reported to you, Mr. Cha, could I present this possible work schedule scenario for your consideration? My hope is you and others, myself, we're having to do it here. And then I understand a document that people are completing and having approved, and I think there's 6-month sort of intervals, and that allow for that flexibility. I suspect that even that form will continue to go through iterations of refinement.
Right. Thank you so much, Chancellor Muñoz. I think your comments there are something that we all are wanting to hear, because I think we tend not to hear it enough, and it's refreshing to hear you say it specifically. I know I'm looking at time, and we're just about at time, so I want to pass it over to Austin real quick, and she can close us out.
Thank you, Alvin, and thank you, Chancellor Muñoz, for being with us this afternoon. I know we've had a lot of questions that we couldn't get to. We could be talking all afternoon about all the things that are happening on campus and your perspective, but I want to give you the last couple of minutes to just any final comments for you. Looking forward to continuing working with you this year. I share with my colleagues often, you know, we're excellent researchers, we're a research institution, and we're excellent to our students, and our staff have the same opportunity to be just as excellent and leaders in what we do, and here we are. So thank you for being with us this afternoon, and I'll let you have the last comment.
Well, Austin, again, thank you and the group. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree more with your sort of summary statement. And there's no reason that we can't create an environment of excellence for staff to thrive. And I've been other places, and there've been. This is not my first university, and there's challenges everywhere. I promise you. I spoke to somebody from a very prestigious school, been around a couple hundred years. He's got his challenges. Look, we work with this commodity called human beings. There's always challenges, and but we're aspirational. We're driven by excellence in the way you described. So if we have a shared vision, and we do, and we have shared values, then we can get to a shared outcome, a shared destination. And so I'm committed to doing that. I couldn't be more excited about the future of UC Merced, particularly as we hopefully emerge with momentum from the pandemic and all of the damage that it's caused. And UC Merced cannot emerge from that with momentum, and further and forward, any of that, without staff, period. And so I'm happy to come back and answer the balance of the questions. I'm happy to do it. Most everything that I've said has not been scripted. So I'm happy to come back and update the group as we continue to make progress. Before I leave, if I could a moment, just a sort of a request of privilege, I would like to ask Priya Lakareddy, who serves as the staff representative for the entire UC, if she had any thoughts for our effort, and then I'm happy to end there.
Oh, thank you, Chancellor Muñoz. This is great. And one of the things I just want to say is that $1 million of investment that you made into staff, like you said, no other campus, no other system has done that. So I think there's a lot of good happening here in the Chancellor Leadership Academy, which I was a part of. We made sure that staff who are don't have the leadership position, but are taking leadership opportunities in the university, have a chance to apply to professional development on our campus. So I think the application period is closed, but I really think it's important for people to see that it came from you and from your office. And so I just wanted to share that information. But as staff leaders, it's all, even if you're not a leader on campus, but we can do leadership from anywhere. And it's our responsibility to connect with our managers and our supervisors and our colleagues to all talk about the issues that impact us. And so thank you for these opportunities for all of us. And our staff assembly is doing great. Other leadership opportunities are great on this campus.
Thank you, Pierre. I'll just end with saying, look, our staff are the finest, among the finest anywhere in higher education in the world. You're among the very, very, very best. Don't doubt that for a second, and don't forget it, because every day I come to work, I'm reminded of the excellence of the things that you do every single day. And Priya does a magnificent job of representing, not just, she has a particular warm spot for UC Merced staff, but she always talks about staff with the regents and President Drake and everyone at our meetings. And I just think you are so well represented by her intellect and enthusiasm. And I'm just delighted to continue to work together to realize everything we want on our campus.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, Priya, for your comments. Really looking forward to the year ahead. I know we're over the hour, so appreciate your time and being here today, and all those who were able to attend. Again, we're recording, and we'll get our recording up on our website soon for those who were not able to join us today. So thank you so much. Closing comments from staff assembly, keep an eye out for the things to come. We're hosting our next Bobcat Bites. I believe, Chancellor, right in your backyard, right around the corner from you. That is October 5th. So looking forward to that, and hopefully you can stop in for some coffee if you're available that morning. Thank you folks for joining, and we'll go ahead and close our program today. Thank you.